I sat at the corner of the long dining table, a plastic plate balanced in front of me while the gold-rimmed china gleamed everywhere else. The roasted turkey's aroma filled the room, but all I could taste was the sting of silence. Paper plates are fine for her. Carly's voice floated across the table, casual, practiced, cruel. My son didn't flinch. He didn't defend me. He just kept pouring wine. After 30 years of marriage, after raising him through scraped knees and broken dreams, after holding his hand through every storm, I was the guest. I was the inconvenience. I was disposable. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Helen didn't touch the envelope for 3 days. It had arrived with the usual bills and junk, just sitting there, glossy and smug, with its gold-embossed lettering and ivory stock. A Thanksgiving invitation from Drew and Carly Renshaw. Mailed, formal, like a ceasefire sent across enemy lines. Her name was handwritten in Carly's looping cursive, Helen Whitaker. No Ms., no dear, just a name, a fact. A courtesy, maybe, if you squinted. By the third day, she opened it. Inside was a single card with clean serif font and minimal warmth. We'd love to have you join us for Thanksgiving dinner. 4 p.m., our home. Hope you'll come. It would mean a lot to Drew. Carly. Of course it would mean a lot to Drew. He hadn't looked her in the eyes since mediation. And Carly. Carly had always worn graciousness like a designer coat, the kind that makes everyone else feel underdressed. Helen stood at her sink, the card in one hand, a chipped coffee mug in the other. She hadn't been inside that house since she'd packed her final box, 13 months ago, on a Tuesday, while the walls still smelled like her. Now she was being asked to return as a guest. A tolerated footnote to a life she once helped build. The Renshaw's neighborhood looked pulled from a mortgage commercial, pillars, wreaths, and perfect landscaping. Helen's 10-year-old Hyundai grumbled up the street like it knew it didn't belong. She parked 2 houses down, stepped out into the sharp Cleveland air, and adjusted her coat collar against the wind. A bottle of red wine, mid-range, glass, was tucked under her arm. Not out of politeness, it was armor. Carly opened the door before Helen reached for the bell. She wore ivory cashmere and cranberry lipstick. Her smile landed perfectly. "Helen, we're so glad you made it," she said, brushing imaginary lint off her sleeve. Helen forced a return smile. "Thanks for the invitation." The warmth of the house hit immediately: cinnamon, garlic, roasting bird. Inside, laughter rolled in waves. Conversations about renovations, stocks, toddlers. Helen followed Carly through the open floor plan she used to dream up on Pinterest. "Drew's in the dining room," Carly said. "He's been looking forward to seeing you." But he didn't come to the door, didn't greet her. At the table, he stood slowly. "Hey, Helen," he said, voice low, almost gentle. "You look well." She nodded. "You too." He looked exactly the same, clean-shaven, cable-knit sweater, just enough gray to make him look distinguished. He didn't hug her. Didn't even step toward her. He simply gestured to the far end of the table. "We saved you a seat." The chair was at the corner, between 2 toddlers with sticky hands and barely within reach of the main serving dishes. Every other place setting sparkled with heavy china, gold-rimmed glassware, linen napkins folded into festive shapes. Helen's plate was plastic, her fork disposable. A wrinkled paper napkin with turkeys printed on it sat limply on her lap. No one said a word about it. She felt the stares only in their absence. Conversations resumed. One guest talked about Aspen. Another praised Carly's roasted Brussels sprouts like they were a revelation. Helen reached for the wine in front of her. The glass was acrylic. She poured anyway. She hadn't taken a bite when Carly leaned toward her friend across the table. Her voice wasn't raised, but it carried, precisely calibrated. Paper plates are fine for her. A few chuckles followed. Not cruel, not loud. Just enough to sting. Helen didn't look up. Drew said nothing. He kept pouring wine, kept talking to his boss like nothing had happened. Helen's grip tightened on her plastic fork. Then she placed it down. Slowly, quietly, as if releasing something fragile. She stood, smoothing her sleeves. "Everything okay?" Carly asked, flashing teeth. Helen's smile was a shade too calm. "Yeah, I think I've had enough. But you barely touched your plate." "Some things leave a bad taste," she said, reaching for her coat. A few guests turned toward her. No one stopped her. She stepped out into the cold and let the door shut behind her. The wind sliced across her cheeks as she walked to her car. Her heels tapped steady against the pavement, the sound crisp in the silence of the street. Inside her coat pocket, her fingers found something small and metallic, a flash drive. She hadn't meant to bring it tonight, but it was there. The same one she'd tucked away the day she found those emails. The one that had never made it into the lawyer's files. The one that could unmake the tidy life Drew and Carly had curated. She looked back at the house one last time, lit windows glowing with curated warmth, and smiled. Helen drove in silence. No music, no news. Just the rhythmic hum of tires and the faint crackle of the heater pushing warm air into the cabin of her car. Cleveland's streets were mostly deserted. Just a few porch lights glowing like distant lanterns, families gathered around fireplaces she no longer had access to. Snow flurries tapped the windshield like fingers impatient to be let in. She didn't rush. The plastic fork, the paper plate, Carly's comment. They hadn't broken her. They'd unsealed something older, something quieter, something she'd archived alongside receipts and property records and email chains from the final months before the split. Her apartment smelled faintly of lavender and something fried when she opened the door. She tossed her keys onto the side table, hung up her coat, and stepped out of her heels one at a time without bending over. Then she flicked on the desk lamp and sat. The flash drive was already in her coat pocket. She plugged it into the USB slot with a soft click, and the folders blinked awake. Labeled, sorted, cross-referenced. She scrolled until she found the document. Renshaw property, check legal, status.pdf. Her breath held. When Drew left, he'd made a big show of buying the house with Carly. "Starting over," he'd said, like real estate and emotional rebirth came bundled together. But Helen remembered the gaps, the stalling in escrow, the hushed arguments in the kitchen, the bank statements he stopped leaving open on the counter. She opened her notebook from last November. Page after page of research, property searches, tax record screenshots, recorded phone calls, things she hadn't needed for court, but collected anyway. Like she knew she'd need them later. There, underlined twice in red ink. Leasehold agreement, not transferred to buyer. They never closed. She leaned back, eyes scanning the header. The house still belonged to a holding company in Connecticut. An LLC used by a widowed investor who hadn't been able to offload the property due to zoning issues and quiet title disputes. Helen reached for her phone and dialed. It rang once, twice. Then, "Hey, stranger." Pam's voice was warm, if a little surprised. Helen exhaled. "Is the property on Hawthorne still in limbo?" Pam, her friend since undergrad, and now a real estate paralegal at one of Cleveland's scrappier boutique firms, didn't hesitate. "The Renshaw's place?" "Yeah. Title's still messy. The LLC wants out. Fast and quiet, but buyers have been skittish." Helen's heart kicked against her ribs, but her voice stayed even. "No buyers lined up?" "Nothing solid. Owners entertaining direct offers. You interested?" Helen stared out her apartment window. The glow from the Renshaw's neighborhood shimmered in her memory. Too clean. Too perfect. Maybe. Pam laughed softly. Wouldn't that be something? Helen didn't laugh. She closed her laptop, stood up slowly, and walked to the kitchen, the hum of the fridge and ticking wall clock suddenly louder than they'd been in months. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. Drew had built his new life like a house of cards. White walls, curated dinner guests, and a fake mortgage. But the foundation was paper. She took a sip. Calm face, cold hands. Her fingers trembled slightly against the glass, but her pulse had already settled. Pam was still on the line. "You okay?" she asked, more softly this time. Helen blinked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" Helen looked at the far wall. A corkboard held old grocery lists, coupons, and a post-it with the Wi-Fi password. She plucked the post-it off and crumpled it. "About how satisfying it'll be," she said, "when they open the front door one day and realize it doesn't belong to them." Helen stepped into Marcus Keller's office and paused just long enough to take in the difference between where she stood and where she was going. The building was old but clean. 3rd floor, no elevator. Carpeted halls that smelled like copy toner and burnt coffee. Keller Law wasn't one of those sprawling downtown towers with skyline views. It was quiet, unassuming, like Helen wanted it. Marcus stood when she entered. Mid-40s, trim beard, the kind of wardrobe that said he still ironed his shirts himself. He didn't offer her a handshake. They were past that now. "Morning, Helen," he said simply. "Marcus?" She nodded. The office door shut behind her with a quiet click. On his desk, a manila folder, a Mont Blanc pen, and a steaming mug of something dark. No clutter, no photos, just contracts. Helen took a seat across from him. "LLC paperwork's filed," he said, flipping the folder open. "Renshaw Holdings, as requested. Delaware registered. Blind structure. You'll own it entirely, but on paper, it's just another shell with a generic P.O. box in Dover." She nodded. "Perfect." He slid the first set of documents toward her. "This is the letter of intent for the purchase. You'll sign as managing member of the LLC. Pam's already prepped the seller. They're ready to move." Helen picked up the pen. No hesitation, no glance toward the door. Just a quick flick of ink on paper. Initials, sign, date. It felt transactional, antiseptic. But something buzzed under her skin as she handed the page back. "They'll think it's an investment firm," Marcus said, watching her carefully. "Won't trace it to you." "I don't need them to know yet." He gave a slow nod. "You'll have an inspection window. Pam will negotiate contingencies, but we can close in under 30 if we don't stir up the dust." Helen's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Let's not stir anything until I say so." Back in her apartment, the December light spilled through the blinds, slicing the living room into bars of gold and shadow. Helen brewed coffee, not because she needed the caffeine, but because the ritual grounded her. Her phone buzzed once. Notification. Carly Renshaw posted a new photo. She tapped it open. A wide-angle shot of their open-concept kitchen. Exposed beams, a reclaimed wood table, wine glasses still drying on the counter. The caption read, "Hosting's exhausting, but worth it for our beautiful home. Jaksha gratitude. Thanksgiving magic." Helen zoomed in absently. Same table she once refinished by hand. Same backsplash she picked out at Home Depot while Drew grumbled about tile options. She clicked away. Another ping. A text. "Drew. Thanks for coming." Awkward, I know, but it meant something. No punctuation. No warmth. Not even a period. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, "You're welcome," but didn't send it. She deleted the draft and put her phone face down on the table. Instead, she opened her laptop. Pam had just emailed a scanned copy of the seller's signed counteroffer. No changes. The original price held. Helen exhaled through her nose. They were expecting another showing tomorrow. A young couple. Pre-approval still pending. The seller didn't want delays. Didn't want attention. Just wanted out. And now, Helen had her foot in the door, and her name nowhere near the paperwork. Across town, Carly sat in the same kitchen. Phone in one hand, glass of leftover Chardonnay in the other. She smiled at her own photo, watching the likes roll in. Drew was upstairs watching football. The kids were with his sister for the weekend. She scrolled through the comments. "Your home is gorgeous. Where did you get that centerpiece?" "Real goals. That backsplash." Carly replied to each one dutifully, wine sloshing slightly with every emoji. She didn't hear Drew's phone vibrate on the end table. Didn't see Helen's name flash briefly across the screen. Didn't know anything had shifted. Yet. The inspection wrapped without a word. Pam texted Helen a single sentence at 7:41 a.m. on Tuesday. Clean, no flags, no fanfare, no delays. Just a smooth walkthrough conducted by a quiet, neutral inspector who billed through a third party. No paper trail connecting anything to Helen. The seller hadn't been present. Neither had Drew or Carly. Helen sipped her coffee at her kitchen table, scrolling through the PDF summary while the city outside her window started waking up. Roof. Solid. HVAC. New. Foundation. Stable. The property wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. She wasn't buying a home. She was buying leverage. At 10:03 a.m., Marcus forwarded the title transfer paperwork. Subject line: executed per LLC terms. Title cleared. Ownership en route. There was no flourish, no legal footnote, just a few digital signatures, a county stamp, and a quiet shift in reality. Helen Whitaker, through an anonymous LLC, was now the legal owner of the house on Hawthorne Lane. Nina at the title office called her by noon. "Just confirming," Nina said in a clipped, competent voice. "All documents are in and recorded. Effective date is Friday, but you'll be listed on file by Thursday afternoon. I'll email the certified copy once it's indexed." Helen nodded into the phone. "Thank you." "Nina?" "Of course. And just so you know, this was fast. Not many deals move this clean." "That was the goal." "Then you nailed it." Helen hung up, her fingers still resting lightly on the phone. For the first time in a year, her apartment felt still. Not just quiet, but settled. Like the room had exhaled with her. That evening, just before dusk, Helen drove out to the property. She didn't park in the driveway. She stopped at the edge of the cul-de-sac 2 houses down and walked. No clipboard, no briefcase. Just her coat zipped high, gloves tucked into one hand, the other loose by her side. No one was outside. The neighborhood was tucked into dinner hour and bedtime stories. Porch lights flicked on automatically. The air smelled like wood smoke and leftover gravy. Helen stopped across the street from the Renshaw's house. Her house. Now. On record. She didn't cross over. Didn't get close enough to trigger the porch camera or the ring motion alert Carly had probably set up. She simply walked the edge of the property line, the sidewalk tracing the curve of the yard, the fence, the hedges she once planted before the divorce, uprooted everything else. Her boots crunched softly on the salted pavement. The holiday wreath on their door caught a gust of wind and turned slightly, like it had noticed her. She stood still and watched the kitchen light flicker on. Inside, Carly moved back and forth behind the island, pouring wine, reheating something in the microwave, adjusting a throw pillow on the built-in breakfast bench. She looked rushed, like she was trying too hard. A flicker of blue light from the living room signaled Drew was already checked out, probably watching a game, feet up, glass in hand. Helen blinked. Not slowly, not fondly, just once. Then she turned and walked away. Back in her apartment, she poured herself a drink. Bourbon this time. 2 fingers? Neat. Her phone lit up with another Carly post. Spent the afternoon updating our Zillow pics. New lighting makes all the difference. Swipe to see our forever home glow. Gaha, home goals. Cha, owned, not rented. Saha, blessed. Helen opened the listing. Carly had clearly staged the entire shoot herself. Wide angles, natural light, fresh flowers on the table, and 2 open books, stacked artfully on the ottoman. The kind of photos meant to tell a lie you wanted to believe. Helen zoomed in. The throw blanket on the guest bed? She'd knit that during chemo treatments with Drew's mom. The lamp in the study? Her father's? Carly hadn't bought a home. She'd moved into a museum of someone else's choices, and now tried to pose as its curator. Helen reached for her laptop and clicked open a tab she hadn't used in months. Eviction protocols, Ohio residential lease-to-purchase agreements. Her eyes scanned line by line, pausing only once, on a clause labeled unauthorized representations of ownership. Her lips parted just slightly, not a smile, something colder. She copied the language into a new document and typed one word above it. Notice. The pen didn't shake. Helen signed the closing documents in a private conference room lined with framed watercolor prints and fake ficus trees. There was no attorney present, no champagne toast, no brass keys on velvet ribbons. Just Pam across the table, a quiet notary in the corner, and a stack of pages that would finish what Carly started last Thanksgiving. Helen pressed harder than she needed to as she signed. Page after page, signature after signature, initials in tidy loops, the ink soaked in. Legal, final, clean. Pam flipped the last page toward her. This one records the transfer to the LLC, she said softly, sliding a tabbed sheet into position. Once this is time-stamped and filed, Drew and Carly officially become tenants. Helen signed. No flourish, just pressure. The notary stood, nodded once, and left to file the documents. Pam didn't speak right away. She reached into her satchel, pulled out a small padded envelope, and slid it across the table. Spare set, she said. From the lockbox. Code hasn't changed. Helen didn't pick them up. Not yet. Pam folded her hands. You're sure about this? Helen looked down at the envelope. The keys inside barely made a sound, but she could feel the weight of them in the air. I'm sure, she said. Pam hesitated, then nodded. Okay. It's yours now. All of it. The Renshaw's SUV was gone when Helen pulled into the cul-de-sac. A wreath still hung on the door, only now with silver accents instead of autumnal leaves. The Christmas transition had begun. Helen parked where she always did, 2 houses down, by the fire hydrant. It was almost muscle memory now. She waited. Watched. No movement. Porch light off. No shadow behind the blinds. She walked slowly up the path and punched in the garage code she knew Drew hadn't bothered to change. The keypad blinked green. The mechanism whirred. The garage door lifted. It opened like it always had, like it never stopped belonging to her. Inside, the smell was the same: motor oil, sawdust, a faint trace of the citrus cleaner she used to buy in bulk. Helen stepped in and paused. Everything was still. Nothing had shifted, not even the orientation of the rake leaning by the water heater. She moved through the door to the mudroom and into the kitchen. No alarms, no beeping. The code hadn't changed there either. She crossed the tile, the sound of her boots absorbed by the rugs she bought at West Elm 3 years before Drew left. The kitchen was tidy but performative. Carly clean, just enough for Instagram. Helen opened the fridge, a bottle of oat milk. Truffle hummus, pre-cut fruit. She closed it. Upstairs, she walked the length of the hallway, touched the edge of the banister she'd stripped and restained herself one summer while Drew was away at a conference. The bedroom door creaked the same way it always had. The hinges had never been oiled. She entered the guest room. Same placement, same bed. Her throw blanket folded on the edge. The one Carly had kept from the old place. Helen didn't touch it. She just stood there, long enough to imagine Carly fluffing pillows and dimming lights for a house guest, never knowing she was decorating someone else's asset. Downstairs again, Helen opened the closet beneath the stairs. A box of extra batteries sat on a shelf beside the dog leash. She took two and replaced the batteries in the Nest thermostat, one of the things Drew never bothered to maintain. The screen blinked awake. Temperature, 67. System, auto. She tapped the display gently, like it was a pet she'd returned to check on. Satisfied, she returned to the kitchen. Before she left, she reached up to the top shelf above the pantry and tucked a manila envelope behind the cookie tins Carly never used. Inside, a copy of the lease agreement, unsigned, but dated. The cover page read, Renshaw Holdings LLC, Occupancy Acknowledgement. Just enough to rattle. Just enough to let the silence grow teeth. Later that night, back in her apartment, Helen poured another bourbon. She didn't check Carly's socials. She didn't need to. The keys sat on the table beside her laptop, dull brass catching the light from the desk lamp. In 48 hours, the deed would be indexed, public, accessible, and searchable. Helen balanced the foil-covered container in one hand and her gloves in the other as she walked up the front steps. The sun had already dipped below the rooftops, and Christmas lights blinked lazily along the gutters of every house on the street, except this one. The Renshaw's strands were still boxed in the garage. Half the neighborhood had already posted their decorations on Instagram. Carly was behind. Helen pressed the doorbell once, then waited. The door swung open with a familiar creak. "Helen," Carly said, voice tight, smile tighter. She wore a cropped sweater in holiday red and held her phone just slightly out of view, her thumb still mid-text. Behind her, the house smelled of cinnamon candles and something baked, but artificial, like it had come from a plug-in, not the oven. "I was in the area," Helen said calmly, lifting the foil tray slightly. "Thought I'd drop something off." "Oh," Carly said, surprised but scrambling. "That's thoughtful. Come in, I guess." Helen stepped inside. The warmth hit immediately, but it felt staged. Too clean, too curated. A playlist murmured from a Bluetooth speaker on the kitchen counter. Jazz adjacent, festive but non-committal. From the living room, Drew looked up. His face flickered. Recognition, then mild discomfort, then a lazy grin. "Did you bring pie?" he called. Helen smiled without showing teeth. "Just something warm to take home." She walked past Carly, uninvited but unobstructed. Her boots made no sound on the familiar rugs. She moved like she still lived there, and in a way, she did. At the kitchen island, she set the foil tray down gently, the kind of slow, deliberate movement that makes people hold their breath without knowing why. Beside it, she placed a plain, unsealed envelope. "Chicken and wild rice," she said, almost conversational. "I made too much." Carly hovered just a few steps away, eyes flicking from the envelope to the dish and back again. Her phone still sat in her palm, but she wasn't texting anymore. Drew ambled into the kitchen, a bottle of beer half empty in one hand. He looked at the tray and gave a small nod of appreciation. "Looks good," he said, not bothering to ask what was in the envelope. Carly reached for it. Helen didn't stop her. Inside, a single printed sheet. The same lease document Helen had left behind the cookie tins, but this one was signed and dated, with a formal cover letter from Marcus Keller attached. Carly unfolded it slowly. Her mouth twitched, reading the first line. Then her eyes flicked back up at Helen. "What is this?" Helen met her stare without blinking. "An update. For your records." Drew reached for the paper, now curious. What update? Carly didn't hand it over. The silence thickened. Helen turned and opened a kitchen drawer, pulled out a stray spoon and stirred the tray beneath the foil without asking. Still warm? She murmured, more to herself than anyone. Carly finally found her voice. You can't just... Actually, Helen said softly, I can. She removed the spoon, wiped it neatly with a paper towel, and slid it into the dishwasher. Drew finally took the envelope from Carly and scanned the contents. His brow furrowed. Wait, what the hell is this? Renshaw Holdings? Helen glanced around the kitchen. The light was hitting just right, reflected off the subway tiles she'd installed herself, glinting off the chrome she picked before Carly ever set foot in this house. You really should read the whole thing, she said, pulling her gloves back on. It explains a lot. You're saying we're renting from you? Carly said, voice sharp now. I'm saying the house doesn't belong to you, Helen replied. And never did. Drew looked up, face pale. You bought it? I did. Carly stepped forward. You're bluffing. Google the parcel number, Helen said simply. It's public record. Then she turned to leave, buttoning her coat as she walked toward the door. Oh, and you might want to replace the batteries in the smoke detector, she added without looking back. The chirping upstairs? It's intermittent, but it'll drive you insane. She opened the door and paused. One more thing. She turned back, just enough to let the light catch her face. The next envelope won't be hand-delivered. Carly sat at the island, the letter in her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it by smoothing it flat. She cleared her throat, then read aloud, voice sharp with disbelief. Notice of termination of lease. 30 days to vacate premises from date of delivery. She paused. Her eyes darted to Drew, then back to the page. Her breath hitched on the next line. Due to material misrepresentation of ownership in public forums and failure to maintain agreed-upon tenant responsibilities. Carly looked up. Her face had drained to a sheet of eggshell white, save for the blotch of rising color on her neck. This is a joke. Helen took another slow sip of cider from the mug she'd helped herself to, seated comfortably at the far end of the island. Her coat was folded neatly over the back of the chair. Her expression was unreadable, but her posture wasn't defensive. It was rooted. If it were a joke, Helen said, I'd have sent balloons. Drew sat half-leaning against the counter, shoulders hunched, unreadable as he took the letter from Carly's hands and scanned it for himself. He didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was low. This is serious. No shit, it's serious, Carly snapped, rising from her stool. She's evicting us. Helen tilted her head, swirling what remained of her cider. I'm enforcing a clause. There's a difference. You're enjoying this, Carly said, eyes narrow. Not really, Helen replied. I don't enjoy wasting energy. I like clarity. Carly moved to the window, yanking the curtain aside. Outside, Pam stood in the driveway, folder in hand, dressed in black slacks and a long wool coat, like some kind of executioner with perfect posture. Oh my God, Carly muttered. She brought back up. She's here to walk you through the documents, Helen said calmly. To make it official. Drew turned toward her. You can't just... I can, Helen interrupted, no heat in her voice. And I already did. Title's been recorded. Lease was signed by your seller. You assumed ownership when none existed. The LLC owns this home. But we've been... Carly started, gesturing wildly toward the living room, as if the decor could vouch for her. We've been living here. Helen nodded. Yes. Rent-free. You're welcome. This is vindictive, Carly hissed. Helen set the mug down with a soft clink and stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move fast. Everything about her was composed, her coat now draped casually over her forearm. "Carly," she said, "I'm just doing what's best for me." Her tone never shifted. It was almost gentle. Almost. "Like you do." Carly froze. A beat passed. Then another. "You're punishing us because he left you." Carly spat. "Because he found better." Helen blinked once. Her smile didn't rise, but her eyes sharpened. "Punishment would have meant lawyers and public record," she said. "This is a gift. Quiet, clean, dignified." "You don't get to take everything," Drew said, his voice cracking slightly now. Helen looked at him for a long moment. "You gave it away," she said softly. Then she stepped past them, letting silence follow like a second shadow. At the door, she paused and turned. 30 days, she said. "That's generous. I could have asked for 15. Pam was already walking up the driveway. Carly didn't move. Drew stared at the letter again, like a different result might appear if he read it hard enough. Helen opened the door and held it just long enough for Pam to enter. They nodded in passing, nothing exchanged aloud. Pam placed the folder on the island, calm and professional. "Everything's tabbed. Happy to answer any questions." Helen stepped into the cold without looking back. Snow had started to fall, slow, quiet flakes drifting in the orange glow of the streetlights. She reached her car, slid in, and shut the door. From inside, she watched as Carly threw open the front door, yelling something they couldn't hear. Pam didn't flinch. Helen smiled. Just once. Then shifted into drive. The locksmith arrived 10 minutes early. Helen was already waiting in the driveway, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. She wore a heavy wool coat, dark jeans, and no expression. The snow had melted overnight, leaving the lawn damp and brown, the edges of the landscaping beds soggy with runoff. "Ma'am," the locksmith nodded, stepping out of his van. His jumpsuit read Alpha Security, and he moved with the quiet efficiency of someone used to breakups, estate sales, and court orders. Helen handed him the list. Front, garage, basement exterior, and side door. New cores. Deadbolts, too. I want each one keyed to match. "No problem," he said, already grabbing his tools. Inside the house it was quiet. Helen had timed it perfectly. Drew and Carly were at work, the kids at school. Nothing had been touched since she'd left the envelope on the counter days earlier. The same coffee mug still sat in the sink. A coaster bore the faint outline of a sweating beer glass. By the time the locksmith began dismantling the front door hardware, Helen was in the home office, sliding a legal envelope into the center of the desk. Pam had drafted it. Straightforward, clean. No emotion, just statute. This notice serves as formal communication that, effective immediately, any unauthorized entry onto the premises at 2419 Hawthorne Lane will be considered criminal trespass under Ohio Revised Code, paragraph 2911-21. Beneath it, a printed photo of Carly's Instagram post from 2 days ago, the one with the caption, "Still ours, fight for what you love." Helen slipped a copy into a second envelope, sealed it, and placed it in the mailbox. The locksmith called to her from the entryway. "Want to test it?" She walked over, took the new key, and turned it slowly in the fresh brass cylinder. It clicked home, smooth, decisive. "How many copies do you need?" he asked. 4, she said. "Keep 2. Distribute through Pam." He nodded and headed back to the van. Helen stood in the doorway a moment longer. The lock gleamed in the low winter light. For the first time since the invitation landed in her mailbox, there was no trace of Drew or Carly's presence she couldn't erase. Her phone buzzed an hour later. "Drew, 8:17 a.m. Can we talk? Just us. No drama. Cool things off, maybe." Then, "Drew, 8:19 a.m. This is all moving fast. I think we owe it to each other to..." She didn't respond right away. She was in the back bedroom. boxing up a few of her things still scattered around from the old days: books left behind, a framed photo wedged behind the dresser, a scarf she'd knitted that Carly must have forgotten wasn't store-bought. She read the message again, then replied, "Appreciate the outreach, but no need. Everything's already in writing." And then, "Wishing you the best moving forward." She set the phone down, face down on the windowsill, and watched the street below. Carly's SUV had passed by twice, slowly, once alone, once with her sister in the passenger seat. Helen didn't flinch. The locks had already been changed. Legally, the house had been hers for over a week. Emotionally, that took longer. But it was coming. That afternoon, Pam uploaded the rental listing. She posted it on a Whisper listing site they used for off-market properties. January 1st, availability. Premium, 4BR 3BA in East Cleveland suburbs. Newly managed. Quiet ownership. Private showings by appointment only. Photos were updated. Staged with care. No trace of Carly's aesthetic survived. Helen had swapped out the floral throws for clean linens, removed the wine fridge magnets, and boxed the Live Laugh Love sign into storage. The house didn't need slogans anymore. It just needed distance. She didn't text Carly the link. She didn't have to. That evening, as the sun sank behind the roof lines, Helen returned to her apartment. She set the new key on the counter beside a second unopened envelope from Pam, this one labeled simply, "Legal Retainer Reserve." She poured herself a cider, opened her laptop, and refreshed the property listing. 12 views in the first hour, then 23, then a message. "Hi. Is the January 1st move-in date flexible? We're relocating from Chicago and need to land fast." Looks perfect. Helen read the message slowly, then closed the laptop. She didn't need to reply right away. Let them wait. Marcus Keller flipped the folder open without saying a word. The light in his office was different this time, late afternoon shadows streaking across the conference table, the soft hum of a space heater kicking on near the corner. Helen sat across from him, composed in a black turtleneck and gray wool blazer. Her posture was relaxed. Her eyes were not. Marcus slid the latest email printout toward her. "Carly sent this last night. Claims the eviction was retaliatory. Says she and Drew had a verbal agreement to purchase. No formal lease, but asserts implied tenancy." Helen scanned the page with deliberate calm. She's not entirely wrong. It was retaliatory. Marcus arched an eyebrow. "She retaliated first," Helen clarified. "I just responded better." He smirked faintly, then grew serious. "I reviewed the original lease-to-own structure. Their seller never executed the final documents. No signed lease, no transfer of equitable title. That kills any implied ownership. Nina pulled all the file stamps. Chain of title is unbroken from the LLC." Helen nodded, already knowing. "And the social media posts?" He tapped a thumb against the folder. "We've got 6, from both Carly's Instagram and Drew's Facebook. Publicly representing ownership, misrepresentation, and bad faith occupancy. They tank any potential squatter's defense." Helen reached into her own folder and pulled out a labeled flash drive. "Add this." Marcus plugged it into his laptop. A few quick clicks later, the audio began to play. "Yeah, we're not technically the owners yet. The paperwork's still kinda stuck. But whatever. It's our house. The guy's dragging his feet, but I mean, what's he gonna do? Sell it to someone else?" Drew's voice, muffled, slightly slurred. The sound of a beer can cracks in the background. Marcus leaned back, folding his hands behind his head. "Jesus, when was this?" "February. He left it on my voicemail the day after they posted the Valentine's Day remodel reveal. They were painting the baby's room gray-blue." Another voice clip followed. "Pam said if we don't sign this week, she's walking away. I told Drew we just need a few more weeks to move money around. I mean, it's not like anyone else wants this house that bad." Carly. Fast. Clipped. Unaware she was being recorded. Marcus muted the file. These weren't submitted during the divorce? They weren't relevant then. Now they are. He stared at her for a beat. You're always 10 steps ahead, aren't you? Helen gave a small shrug. I'm not impulsive. A buzz from Marcus's phone interrupted the stillness. He checked it. Nina just emailed. Title index is finalized. Public search now shows Renshaw Holdings LLC, effective as of last Friday. No challenges filed, no liens, not even a complaint. Helen leaned forward slightly. Perfect. Marcus closed the laptop and folded his hands. We can issue a cease and desist to any platform if Carly keeps posting like she still owns the place. Nina's pulled her photo metadata. It places her inside the house after the trespass notice was delivered. Helen arched a brow. Will the DA care? Unlikely. But it makes a compelling picture when paired with your inspection file and security camera timestamps. I didn't even have to turn the cameras off, Helen said, half to herself. They didn't notice the system was still registered to me. He paused. So what do you want to do next? Helen looked out the window. Snow had begun falling again, thicker this time. Cleveland's skyline blurred behind the curtain of white. I want them out quietly, she said. No scene, no cops, no headlines. You want graceful. I want final. That night, back in her apartment, Helen sat at her dining table with a pot of Earl Grey and the last of the shortbread cookies her neighbor had dropped off the week before. Her inbox pinged. Nina Morgan, title office. Just confirming, full documentation uploaded and visible on state registry. Attached, PDF of official title history, screenshots from recorder's site, and flagged social media posts post-notice. Helen downloaded the packet, renamed the folder. 24 Montaigne, final. She didn't even open it. Not yet. Outside her window, the wind picked up. A faint glow blinked across the snow-covered street. Headlights. Then brake lights. Carly's SUV. Parked again. This time, she didn't drive past. She just sat there, watching, waiting. Helen didn't move. Let her. The municipal courthouse didn't try to impress anyone. Its cinderblock walls had been painted beige so many times they looked swollen. The fluorescent lights above the hallway benches buzzed like they were about to burn out. Helen arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a slate gray coat, leather gloves, and expressionless calm. Pam met her at the security checkpoint, holding a slim briefcase and a single tabbed folder. Judge Kramer's on today, Pam said as they walked toward courtroom 3B. He's not theatrical. Gets to the point. Helen nodded, eyes steady. That's all we need. Inside, the gallery was mostly empty. A landlord from Akron waited for his eviction to be heard. A young woman filled out custody paperwork in the back row. Carly showed up 6 minutes late, flustered, winded, wearing a tight blazer she probably hadn't worn since Drew's promotion party. Her hair was curled too tightly and her foundation was cracked at the corners of her mouth. She smelled like department store perfume sprayed in a moving car. She snapped at the bailiff without making eye contact. No, I'm here to speak. I'm the one responding. I don't need to check in. I'm involved. Drew trailed behind her, shoulders slumped, wearing the suit Helen had once had tailored for him before a conference in Chicago. He didn't look at Helen. He barely looked at Carly. They sat 2 rows behind her, close enough to hear, not close enough to speak. Docket 39-117, the clerk called out. Renshaw Holdings, LLC versus Carly Mason and Andrew Renshaw. Pam stood. Helen followed. The judge, an older man with a navy haircut and zero interest in nuance, didn't waste a second. Let's keep this moving, he said, flipping through the file the clerk had placed before him. Plaintiff, you are seeking enforcement of a lease termination and court-ordered possession of 2419 Hawthorne Lane. Pam spoke clearly. Correct, Your Honor. The property is owned outright by Renshaw Holdings LLC. The defendants are occupying without legal right or written agreement. Proper notice of lease termination and trespass warnings have been delivered and documented. The judge didn't even glance up. Supporting documents? Pam slid a neatly prepared exhibit folder across the desk. Chain of title, signed notices, time-stamped photos, social media posts, public registry data, and audio records of defendants acknowledging they never finalized the purchase agreement. He nodded once. Defendants, he said, finally glancing toward Carly and Drew. You have anything to submit in response? Carly stood too quickly, holding a manila folder stuffed with loose pages. We live there. We put money into that house. We made improvements. My children have a bedroom with their names on the walls. This whole thing is an ambush. Kramer didn't blink. Are you represented? Carly scoffed. No, we don't need representation to tell the truth. Pam's brow barely moved. Helen didn't turn around. Do you have a lease? The judge asked flatly. We were going to close. We were in talks with the original seller. But didn't close. Carly hesitated. Technically, no, but we had an understanding. Verbal? Yes. No payment history, no written lease, no proof of occupancy beyond the plaintiff's permission? Drew cleared his throat softly. We thought we had more time. The judge turned back to Pam. You served proper notice? Pam tapped the tab. 30 days, hand-delivered, followed by a cease and desist when occupancy continued beyond deadline. Carly's face crumpled, just slightly. We didn't mean to overstay. She's doing this because of the divorce. The judge raised a hand. This court doesn't adjudicate emotional history, he said. It enforces contracts. He looked down, signed a form, and passed it to the clerk. Possession granted. Defendant has 72 hours to vacate. No appeals pending further documentation. That's it. The gavel didn't slam. It didn't need to. Outside, Helen didn't stop walking until she and Pam reached the parking lot. She'll spin it online, Pam said, unlocking the car. Make herself the victim. She already did, Helen replied. Pam handed her a fresh envelope. Copy of the order. Certified. Helen slid it into her coat pocket. Behind her, Carly stood on the steps of the courthouse, phone already in hand, eyes scanning the parking lot. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. Let her. The post went up less than 2 hours after the hearing. A black and white selfie. Carly in her car, face angled high, eyes glossy but dry. Below it, a block of text, melodramatic, coded, and perfectly timed for sympathy. Sometimes you build a life with someone who turns out to be a stranger, and sometimes the strangers you let in your home wear masks for years. Grateful for my kids. Grateful for what we had. Grateful it's over. Hashtags followed. Cheer New Chapter 1, Trust Broken. But not beaten. Single mom strong. The comments flooded in within minutes. You don't deserve this. Sending love. If you need anything, we're here. What happened? Did she do something? Helen didn't read all of it. She saw just enough. The vague weaponization of pain, the careful omission of facts, the public performance of private defeat. Carly's specialty. Across town, the whispers had already begun. Neighbors who'd admired the wreaths and the centerpiece arrangements were now texting one another screenshots. It was all anyone in the cul-de-sac group chat could talk about. Are they getting evicted? I thought they bought that place. Drew said they were going to close months ago. Nobody said Helen's name. They didn't need to. On the second night after the hearing, Drew knocked on Helen's apartment door. It was 9:14 p.m. Cold. Dark. Snowflakes gathering in the creases of his jacket collar. Helen didn't answer. She stood just behind the peephole, silent, watching him shift from foot to foot like a boy who'd been sent to the principal's office. His hands were bare. He hadn't brought anything. No envelope. No apology bouquet. Not even a weak offering of shared history. Just regret. He knocked again. Softer this time. Then he leaned in toward the door, his voice low. "I didn't know she'd take it that far," he said. "I didn't mean for this to get ugly. I never thought you'd actually—" He trailed off. A long pause. The kind that waits for a crack of forgiveness. It didn't come. After a minute, he left. Helen watched him walk back to his car, shoulders caved, headlights bouncing off snowbanks as he pulled away. The next morning, Pam emailed her the turnover schedule. Cleaning crew confirmed. Deck 20th at 11 hours a.m. All utilities will be transferred that morning. New locks. New keypad. Security system refreshed. Helen typed a quick reply. Confirmed. Please hold mail forwarding until Jan. 1. She poured herself a cup of mint tea and lit a small eucalyptus candle near the sink. The apartment was quiet. No music. No hum of conversation or conflict. Just the gentle flick of the flame and the sharp, clean scent of control. She looked around the living room. Her things, simple, neutral, nothing curated for show, felt more permanent now. There was no rush to upgrade. No need to fill space. Everything she wanted fit here. The rest, she'd already taken back. She pulled the envelope from her coat pocket. The certified copy of the court order still crisp. She set it on the counter beside her tea and left it there, unopened. Just before noon, her phone buzzed again. New Zillow message from Natalie M. Chi. "Hi, Helen. We're confirming our December 22nd showing for Hawthorne Lane. We're pre-approved and relocating early. Can we bump to the 20th if the property clears early? Our offer is ready." Helen read the message 3 times, then tapped reply. "Let's talk after the cleaners finish. I'll walk you through it myself." Across town, Carly sat on the floor of what used to be the guest bedroom, surrounded by boxes she hadn't finished packing. Drew was downstairs, watching the game on mute, eyes glazed. The kids were with his parents. Neither of them spoke. On her phone, Carly refreshed the listing. The house she once called hers was now a bullet-pointed block of text. Turnkey 4BR. Quiet ownership. Immediate availability. No mention of her. No trace. Just a house. Just a price. Just a deadline. The couple arrived just after 10 a.m. Right on time. Helen stood at the base of the driveway, bundled in a tailored coat, clipboard tucked beneath her arm. It was cold, the kind that tightened your lungs on the inhale, but she didn't seem to notice. The house behind her gleamed, cleaned, staged, ready. Not empty, just waiting. A gray Subaru pulled up. The driver's door opened first. "Marty and Eileen Rourke," the woman said, extending a gloved hand. "Sorry we're a little early. Habit." Helen shook her hand. Warm grip, steady voice. Eileen wore navy wool and square glasses. Marty followed behind her, tall and stooped, but spry-eyed. He smiled like a man who had spent his life knowing how to read the room. Helen gestured toward the front door. "Please, come in." The Rourkes walked the house like people who had lived through a few decades of surprises. No overreactions, no performative awe. Just nods of quiet approval. At the refinished banisters, the new locks, the gleaming kitchen tiles. "Doesn't feel like a rental," Eileen said softly, pausing by the bay window. "That's the goal," Helen replied. Marty reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "We don't believe in debt," he said plainly. 6 months up front, as agreed. We'll wire for the next 6 at renewal. Helen took the envelope. Didn't even open it. "Welcome," she said. They shook hands again, once more at the front door, and the Rourkes departed with the calm assurance of people who hadn't just rented a house. They'd joined a system that finally made sense to them. At 3:14 p.m., Helen sat in her apartment and opened her banking app, the balance updated in real time. Deposit received, 13,200 $200. Rourke wire transfer. She set up the monthly auto deposit, routing from her LLC account into a private reserve account she'd opened a month ago, quietly, cleanly, outside of her old joint portfolio. The money wasn't revenge, it was insulation. She closed the app and went back to her tea. That night, Carly posted a new photo. It was filtered into grayscale. No caption, just the faint image of her curled on a futon in a dim room, blankets stacked like insulation, a small fake tree blinking faintly in the corner. The blinds behind her were bent. The wall was chipped near the outlet. She was clearly trying to make it look artistic, but it just looked small. One comment underneath. New place? Carly didn't reply. Drew wasn't tagged. He hadn't been tagged in 2 weeks. Helen didn't scroll far. She was already logged into the utility dashboards for the Hawthorne house, scheduling digital access for the Rourkes, closing the last remnants of Carly and Drew's names on every system. No unpaid balances, no lingering notices. She'd waited for one, but none came. Later that evening, Helen lit another candle, cypress this time. The living room smelled like rain and something green. She opened her laptop and checked the surveillance system feed one final time. The motion alerts were silent, the perimeter undisturbed. No sign of Carly's SUV, no rogue entries, no retribution wrapped in passive-aggressive pettiness. Pam had already emailed earlier that afternoon. All personal items removed, garage cleared, no damage to report. Helen clicked through the snapshots. Empty rooms, clean countertops, folded hand towels, not a single thing out of place. She walked to the kitchen and placed the tenant folder in the drawer beside her stove. Not on the desk. Not in the fireproof safe, just near the salt. Manageable, ordinary, done. She poured herself a glass of water, then checked her texts. Still nothing from Drew, not even a final, sorry. She shut the phone off. The next morning, a pale winter sun crept over the Cleveland skyline. Helen opened her curtains and watched it stretch across the floor, slow and golden. She boiled water for tea. No message alerts, no calls, no drama. Just steam rising from the kettle and the gentle hush of a life finally recentered. Then, a knock at the door. 3 slow taps. No pattern, no rush. Just interruption. Helen didn't move. Not yet. She waited. The knock at the door passed without incident. It hadn't been Drew, or Carly, or anyone dramatic. Just a neighbor with a misdelivered package and a smile that didn't ask questions. Helen took it as a sign. By the end of the week, she was back at Marcus Keller's office. Same taupe chairs, same watercolors on the wall, same stack of orderly papers clipped and ready. This time, the folder wasn't about real estate. It was her will. Marcus removed his reading glasses slowly. We can still leave something to the kids if you want to set it up through a trust. Keeps them separate from their parents. Helen shook her head. No ties, she said. Not anymore. She slid a slim printed page across the table. Cleveland Youth Enrichment Fund, a local scholarship initiative supporting low-income students pursuing non-traditional academic paths. Art, music, trades, environmental science, the overlooked, the underestimated. I want everything to go there, she said. Liquid assets, the LLC, any property held at time of death. They'll know how to use it. Marcus didn't ask questions, just nodded and made a note. And Carly? He asked gently. You want her name officially removed from the contingent? She was never family, Helen replied. She was a placeholder. He didn't push. By noon, the documents were signed and submitted. The revisions would be notarized and filed by end of week. Helen would receive confirmation in triplicate. It was done. Not out of spite. out of clarity. 3 days later, Carly sent a voice note. 52 seconds long. No intro. No salutation. Just sobbing. Punctuated by broken phrases. Don't know how we got here. And, you win, okay? And something that might have been, I didn't think you'd really go this far. Helen listened to it once, then deleted it without replying. She didn't save the audio, didn't screenshot the timestamp. She just poured herself a cup of ginger tea and pulled a throw blanket over her knees, letting the sound of the kettle fill the silence the message had tried to puncture. Some grief wasn't hers to hold. That weekend, Helen hosted her book club for the first time since the divorce. 5 women, all in their 50s. A mix of former colleagues, a neighbor from 2 floors down, one friend from a painting class she'd started last summer. The wine was poured early. The book went mostly unmentioned. They laughed about bad TV and better exes. They shared recipes and real estate horror stories. At one point, someone pulled out a phone for a group photo. Candids only, they all insisted. No filters, no posing. Helen leaned in, smiled wide, not performative, present. Later that night, she sent the photo to Pam with a one-line text. "This is what moving on actually looks like." Pam didn't respond right away. But when she did, it was just, "Proud of you." Also, Carly just tried to file a cease and desist over the rental listing name. It was denied in under 3 hours. Helen didn't laugh aloud, but she didn't stop smiling either. On Monday morning, Marcus confirmed the new documents had been filed. Subject line, beneficiary revision, final. Attached, a scanned copy of Helen's updated will, notarized and state verified. No family listed. Just the Cleveland Youth Enrichment Fund, along with a letter of intent she'd written in her own hand. This is for the ones no one bets on, the ones who don't inherit a foundation. Only the weight of being underestimated. Let this ease that, even if just a little. Helen closed the file and dragged it into a folder labeled Legacy. She didn't print it. She didn't frame it. She just let it exist. Permanent. Quiet, unapologetic. Outside her window, winter had settled into something less dramatic. The streets were plowed, the sidewalks salted, the city moved forward. So did she. That evening, her phone buzzed with a notification. Zillow message. New inquiry. "Hello. We saw your current tenant referral listing. My daughter's starting nursing school. Is it still available come June?" Helen didn't rush to reply. Instead, she poured another cup of tea, adjusted the candle on the sill, and stared out across the skyline she'd reclaimed piece by piece. She hadn't just taken the house, she'd taken back the ending and rewritten it. Carly's name vanished in pieces, first from her Instagram bio, then from her joint Facebook page with Drew. The photos didn't disappear, at least not right away, but the captions changed. "Our first home became a place I once loved." The comment replies dried up. Tags were removed. Mentions were scrubbed. Even the holiday photos she'd posted every year, carefully staged, perfectly filtered, disappeared one by one until her grid looked more like an art student's portfolio than a woman who used to throw themed brunches and tag her friends in every casserole. It didn't look like reinvention. It looked like erasure. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was exact. The email from Drew arrived 2 days later. Subject line, closure, no greeting. No warmth. Just 5 paragraphs, neatly typed, double-spaced like a resume cover letter. He'd clearly read it over more than once. No contractions, no emotion. He apologized for how things unfolded. He regretted the confusion surrounding the home. He hoped there were no lingering hard feelings. He signed it, sincerely, Andrew Renshaw. Helen read it once, then hit delete. No draft saved, no screenshot, No late-night forwarding to Pam for commentary. Just gone. That night, Pam showed up at her door with a bottle of red and a half-wrapped cherry pie from her sister's bakery. No warning, no excuse. Just a knock, then a familiar voice through the door. "I brought sugar." And back up. Helen opened the door and stepped aside wordlessly. Pam set everything down like she owned the place and kicked off her boots. "I saw the Zillow feed," she said, pulling two mismatched wine glasses from Helen's cabinet. "The Rourkes posted a review." Helen arched a brow. Pam grinned. 5 stars. Said you were the most professional, ethical property owner they've ever dealt with. Added that the home feels calm, like whoever designed it stopped rushing. Helen blinked once. "That's oddly specific?" "Eileen writes poetry. Don't mock it." They sat by the window, the Cleveland skyline folding into blue dusk as they passed the bottle back and forth. The pie was too sweet, the crust a little uneven, but it didn't matter. It wasn't about sugar. It was about not being alone. Later that night, Helen checked the Nest feed out of habit. The house sat quiet. No motion alerts, no flickering lights. The Rourkes had put up their own wreath. Simple, evergreen, no bows. Their porch light worked on a timer. No Amazon packages stacked on the stoop. No drama. No late-night drives past the property. Peace didn't announce itself. It just stayed. By morning, Helen had a message from Pam. "Tell me again why I didn't leave my ex sooner. Also, your pie is in my fridge. We both forgot it." "You're welcome." Helen replied. "Keep it. You earn the calories." Then she opened her banking app. The rent deposit had already posted for January. Auto-cleared. No flags. No missed deadlines. Behind that, an email from Nina. "FYI, final record of tenancy transfer uploaded to public index. Everything's clean. No holdovers. No backlogs." It was the legal version of an exhale. By the afternoon, a mutual friend forwarded her Carly's latest story, a blurry boomerang of a cocktail glass in a bar Helen didn't recognize. No face. Just a caption in all lowercase. "Sometimes survival doesn't look like strength. It just looks like staying." Helen didn't reply. She didn't even finish watching it. Instead, she pulled her sweater tighter, tucked her knees beneath herself on the couch, and reopened the book club novel she'd barely started. A simple paperback. No symbolism. No tragedy. Just a woman renovating a house she'd inherited from her aunt and learning how to use power tools. A story that didn't revolve around men, or heartbreak, or being the one left behind. Just building. Outside, the streets held a thin sheet of frost. Early evening light stretched long and sharp across her apartment floor. No notifications, no missed calls, no flare-ups waiting to be put out. She closed the book after chapter 3 and walked into the kitchen. The counter was clean. The pie plate still empty from the night before. The wine bottle corked and re-chilled for later. She didn't check her messages again. Didn't glance at Zillow. Didn't wonder where Drew was. She lit another candle, fir and cedar this time, and let it burn. Then, just as the sky turned navy, her phone lit up once. A message from a name she didn't expect. Kira Renshaw Drew's daughter. The one who'd stayed silent through the whole thing. "Hi, Helen. I know it's been a while. I was wondering if maybe we could talk?" Helen stared at the screen, then locked the phone. She didn't answer. Not yet. The table wasn't long. It didn't seat 12. There were no monogrammed placeholders, no thematic garlands spelling out gratitude, no Pinterest-level centerpieces made of dried oranges and rosemary sprigs. But every plate matched. The china was ivory with a thin gold rim, her grandmother's, packed away for decades until this year. The silverware had weight. The linen napkins had been pressed the night before. folded into clean rectangles atop chestnut chargers. Helen had thought about candles, but the afternoon sun spilling through her windows felt more honest. This Thanksgiving didn't need dimming. Pam arrived first, arms full. One bottle of Cabernet, one of sparkling cider, and a lopsided pumpkin cheesecake from a boutique bakery she swore was too expensive to fail. "You've outdone yourself," she said, stepping into the warmth. "It smells like competence and boundaries in here." Helen smirked. "The stuffing has rosemary and self-respect." Next came Dana from 2 floors down, bringing a butternut squash dish that looked better than it tasted, and Evelyn from Helen's painting class, who brought nothing but stories about her new boyfriend and his man bun. They filled the room easily. No one mentioned family. No one needed to. Dinner was served at 4. Plates passed quietly, laughter bubbling under the surface. At one point, Pam raised her glass. "To the calmest room I've been in all year," she said. And to Helen, who reminded us all that dignity is a dish best served with wine. Helen raised her glass too. She didn't toast back. She didn't need to. Her smile reached her eyes. Halfway through dessert, a knock came at the door. No tension, just timing. Helen rose from the table and returned with a clear vase, tall, filled with white lilies and eucalyptus, a small cream card tucked inside. "Thank you for proving precision doesn't need to raise its voice. N.M." Pam read it over her shoulder. "She has good taste and scary efficiency." "She's earned both," Helen said. The vase found its place near the window. The pie kept disappearing. The laughter didn't force itself. After her guests had left, grateful, full, slightly tipsy, Helen packed up the extra slices of cranberry tart and lifted one foil-covered plate from the counter. She wrapped a scarf around her neck and slipped on her boots. Outside, the neighborhood sat quiet. Twilight draped over the roofs like a velvet throw. The wind didn't bite. It brushed, soft and hushed. She walked 1 block, then turned onto Hawthorne Lane. The Rourke's lights were on. Simple, cozy. One lamp in the window, yellow and warm. A fall wreath on the door. Real eucalyptus this time, not plastic. Helen knocked once. Eileen answered, still wearing her apron, hands dusted with flour. "Helen," she beamed. "Come in. Come in. We were just talking about you." "I won't stay," Helen said, holding out the pie. "I just wanted to say thank you for being the kind of people who don't need a reminder to be kind." Eileen's face softened. "That's the nicest thing someone said to me this year." Behind her, Marty waved from the couch, a mug of cider in hand. "We were about to start Home Alone if you want to join." Helen shook her head gently. "Rain check. I've got leftovers and a quiet apartment calling." They exchanged warm goodnights. She turned to leave. Back home, Helen placed the empty pie dish in the sink and poured herself the last of the cider. The china sat clean, stacked neatly beside the dish rack. The napkins waited to be washed. She stood at the window and looked out over the city. Not for answers, just to see it. No inbox pings, no Instagram alerts, no low-grade dread hum under her skin. No Carly, no Drew, no paper plates. Just her. Full. Still. Free. She thought briefly of last year. Of sitting at that other Thanksgiving table, quiet, disposable cutlery in hand, surrounded by people who knew what they were doing and did it anyway. She didn't hate them anymore. She just didn't owe them anything. Helen took a breath, slow and steady, then whispered to no one. "She gave me a paper plate. I gave her a new address." Carly's name vanished in pieces, first from her Instagram bio, then from her joint Facebook page with Drew. The photos didn't disappear, at least not right away, but the captions changed. "Our first home became a place I once loved." The comment replies dried up. Tags were removed. Mentions were scrubbed. Even the holiday photos she'd posted every year, carefully staged, perfectly filtered, disappeared one by one until her grid looked more like an art student's portfolio than a woman who used to throw themed brunches and tag her friends in every casserole. It didn't look like reinvention. It looked like erasure. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was exact. The email from Drew arrived 2 days later. Subject line, closure. No greeting. No warmth. Just 5 paragraphs, neatly typed, double-spaced like a resume cover letter. He'd clearly read it over more than once. No contractions. No emotion. He apologized for how things unfolded. He regretted the confusion surrounding the home. He hoped there were no lingering hard feelings. He signed it sincerely, Andrew Renshaw. Helen read it once, then hit delete. No draft saved, no screenshot, no late-night forwarding to Pam for commentary. Just gone. That night, Pam showed up at her door with a bottle of red and a half-wrapped cherry pie from her sister's bakery. No warning, no excuse. Just a knock, then a familiar voice through the door. I brought sugar and backup. Helen opened the door and stepped aside wordlessly. Pam set everything down like she owned the place and kicked off her boots. I saw the Zillow feed, she said, pulling 2 mismatched wine glasses from Helen's cabinet. The Rourkes posted a review. Helen arched a brow. Pam grinned. 5 stars. Said you were the most professional, ethical property owner they've ever dealt with. Added that the home feels calm, like whoever designed it stopped rushing. Helen blinked once. That's oddly specific. Eileen writes poetry. Don't mock it. They sat by the window, the Cleveland skyline folding into blue dusk as they passed the bottle back and forth. The pie was too sweet. The crust a little uneven. But it didn't matter. It wasn't about sugar. It was about not being alone. Later that night, Helen checked the Nest feed out of habit. The house sat quiet. No motion alerts. No flickering lights. The Rourkes had put up their own wreath. Simple, evergreen, no bows. Their porch light worked on a timer. No Amazon packages stacked on the stoop. No drama. No late-night drives past the property. Peace didn't announce itself. It just stayed. By morning, Helen had a message from Pam. Tell me again why I didn't leave my ex sooner. Also, your pie is in my fridge. We both forgot it. You're welcome. Helen replied, keep it. You earned the calories. Then she opened her banking app. The rent deposit had already posted for January. Auto cleared. No flags. No missed deadlines. Behind that, an email from Nina. FYI. Final record of tenancy transfer uploaded to public index. Everything's clean. No holdovers. No backlogs. It was the legal version of an exhale. By the afternoon, a mutual friend forwarded her Carly's latest story. A blurry boomerang of a cocktail glass in a bar Helen didn't recognize. No face, just a caption in all lowercase. Sometimes survival doesn't look like strength, it just looks like staying. Helen didn't reply. She didn't even finish watching it. Instead, she pulled her sweater tighter, tucked her knees beneath herself on the couch, and reopened the book club novel she'd barely started. A simple paperback. No symbolism, no tragedy. Just a woman renovating a house she'd inherited from her aunt and learning how to use power tools. A story that didn't revolve around men, or heartbreak, or being the one left behind. Just building. Outside, the streets held a thin sheet of frost. Early evening light stretched long and sharp across her apartment floor. No notifications, no missed calls, no flare-ups waiting to be put out. She closed the book after chapter 3 and walked into the kitchen. The counter was clean, the pie plate still empty from the night before. The wine bottle corked and re-chilled for later. She didn't check her messages again. Didn't glance at Zillow. Didn't wonder where Drew was. She lit another candle, fir and cedar this time, and let it burn. Then, just as the sky turned navy, her phone lit up once. A message from a name she didn't expect. Kira Renshaw Drew's daughter. The one who'd stayed silent through the whole thing. "Hi, Helen. I know it's been a while. I was wondering if maybe we could talk?" Helen stared at the screen, then locked the phone. She didn't answer. Not yet.